Welcome to episode 95 of The Hard Truth About B2B E-commerce. I'm back with Tim after a little break. We missed a few weeks, but we're back.
It's great to be back. Hey, everybody, it's Timothy Peterson, and I'm going to continue our longtime tradition of shout outs. I've got a few people, one of whom I was really surprised to hear that they listen. So, Regina Turman, I want to say hi to you. Regina's an executive at MasterCard. So, we have people in finance who are listening to us as well. She found us through a client of hers who happened to be listening to the podcast. So, think that
Wow.
that's fantastic. I'm really happy to hear that. If you are someone who is listening to this podcast and you want to shout out, I might just try to squeeze you in. So please reach out, find me on LinkedIn. Happy to do it. A couple other quick ones. Ray Fabic, who I'm continuing to work with, he is now a dedicated, follower of us and listening to our episodes. He had started on number one, and he's continuing to work through them. And also, we have a nexus of people who are now listening, I've discovered in the Netherlands, because we've had, some guests from Sana and from other places, and they're based in the Netherlands. And now we have other people in the Netherlands who have been reaching out who are listening us as well. So the international love continues, and very happy for all
The
that.
Netherlands is like they're like more advanced B2B e-commerce ecosystem than pretty much everyone else, it seems like.
I'm very very happy to hear this, and you're right. I think that they are one of the most advanced in this area. So glad to hear it. Now I'm just going to pause for a moment so that we can insert our sponsor mentions, and then we've got a really exciting day for you here. Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance. Isaiah, do we have Mark Brohan visiting us again? How lucky are we?
Yeah, we're finally getting back to repeat guests. I think we've had enough episodes where it's like, some of these guests need to come back because, things change. It's been, I don't even know, maybe it's been 2 years. I'd have to go look at
It's
when
a
we
while.
last posted it, but you have at least a year's worth of new data for us. So, Mark, for people that don't know who you are, I mean, I think the most people in our industry do, but people are learning, right? People are,
Who am I?
Who are
yeah.
you, Mark?
I'm the bad penny
Mark,
that
who
keeps
are
turning
you?
up. That's who I am. No, I do. My colleague Paul and I basically cover B2B commerce daily as kind of our beat, our passion, the thing we do. And Digital Commerce 360, we've been covering e-commerce since 1998, both sides of the ball. But we go back covering B2B commerce since the dot-com crash of 2000. So
Mhm.
there's not a lot we haven't seen. Uh, there's not a lot of folks that we don't talk to kind of keep our pulse on the market. And then more importantly, 5 years ago, after measuring, kind of the B2C and online retail market, all different ways, we began trying to benchmark the size, the growth, the growth drivers of the B2B industry. And my point is, we've got a lot of numbers. Yes, we do. I think our numbers get better every year because we're getting more feedback to them as we publish them, good, bad, or sideways. But that feedback always basically, moves the industry forward by kind of telling people, here's the opportunity, here's where the market is growing, and here's what it means to you. So that's kind of what we do. And yeah, I've been doing it for a lot of years, but I'm still kind of jazzed by it. So it's always fun to kind of talk with you folks on this very innovative and most listened to and watched podcast, I must say. So
Thank you. I'm going to add
Thank
two
you.
things. One, we need to connect offline because I think I have a couple clients or historical clients that might sneak in to the rankings of the B2B rankings. So we should see if they are need to be added.
Pass them along. Look, pass
Yeah,
them along. Happy to have it.
I mean
So
it's good for me, right? Because if they get in there, it's like
It's great for everybody. It's great
it
for
makes
everybody.
I kid you. Well, here's just a quick war story. We did for 15 years. We did the world's biggest B2C e-commerce show. It's called IRCE. A lot of
Yep,
folks, the old dinosaurs like me still know it. But
Me
at
too.
one point we had 10,000 online retailers walking around McCormick Place in Chicago, and we had about 600 exhibitors. It was a big deal, right? Back in the heyday when I was spending my years ranking these online retailers on their top line sales and a bunch of other metrics, we would give away, the print edition. Yes, there was print back then,
Hmm.
Virginia. We would give that away in our exhibit hall, big freaking deal, blah, blah, blah. And then I would walk through the exhibit hall and literally I would have stopped people and thank me. Thank you, Mark. And I'd say, what did I do? Well, because your ranking made me go public, or your ranking got me
wow.
the buyer I needed to kind of sell my business, or thank you because we got the big old seed money to kind of grow us. My point is, all these guys were fat, dumb, and happy, and all I got was a handshake.
Yeah.
Nobody, all those years, nobody bought me a damn beer about the whole thing. So shows you what a
Yeah, I
business
just
genius
sold my
I am.
business for $100 million, but thanks for that ranking. And
One of the reasons I love having you on, Mark, is that it really does remind me of how far we've come because, Mark, our listeners didn't know this from other episodes. Mark and I do go way back as well. I started in e-commerce in 1999. I was at the first IRCE Internet Retailer. I was at the first awards dinner. I spoke there 8 or 10 times. I mean, I don't know how many. Kurt Peters introduced me there. You introduced me there. I feel like it's a big part of my history as well. But boy, it mattered. I have to say that's something that I really want to underline about what you're saying to our listeners is that it mattered at a time before things like Shop Talk and e-tail and all these others, kind of sprung up and became whatever they became. So it really was an incredible and important place to be for a long time.
The thing is, though, the dynamics, the model, the industries. I mean, literally, to this day, B2C is arguably a one-trick pony, right? It's the consumer buying from a merchant in some way, shape, or fashion. So
Mm-hmm.
that's always been the value, that's always been the food chain there, right? So, but the thing is, with B2B, it is so different, so complex,
Yep.
so multi-tiered. Here, I love stats here. Here's one for you, which is in retail, you typically will go to X number of sites before you find the offer, the personalization you like, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
In B2B, a B2B buying team, it's not such an individual, it's a B2B buying team. They could go to as many as 7 or 8 different sites over the course of a 3-month research trying to find out who they think they might want to do business with. So these guys are a lot pickier, right? And the other question, the other thing is, e-commerce is defined literally, very literally, by manufacturers and distribution companies today as my e-commerce site,
Mm-hmm.
my behind the login firewall where I keep everything a secret because you're my best customers. I control the message. Well, you know what? That's a very linear view of this fast being blown up because the B2B buyers today, they're younger, they're digital, and they prefer self-service e-com first with a touch of human, not human with a touch of e-com. And the thing is, those digital buyers, which are kind of driving the freight, they're driving the bus in the industry now. They intermix for up to 10 channels.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's not just the e-commerce site or the apps or the behind the wall firewall kind of stuff. It's 10 different touch points. And that is a massive headache, a massive opportunity. And our jumping off point here is the guys that are struggling, they're struggling to figure this out on both sides. I mean, big, huge companies, big, huge manufacturing companies, distribution companies, small guys, distributors that have been in the industry for 100 years. They're all struggling to find out who is my digital customer, what do they want, and how do I interact with that customer across
Yeah.
not just one, but multiple ways of doing a transaction. And my point of that little soliloquy here is that it's when you figure it out, I have people tell me, well, when you figure it out, let me know, would you? Because they're struggling with it. It's the op, but it's the biggest single opportunity / headache that's confusing a lot of companies out there. We hear about it every single day.
Well, I hate to shamelessly plug myself, but honestly, at Trellis, I think we do have it figured out, and that's what we're doing, right? One of the things that we do at Trellis, there's a million digital agencies, right? And we ran into this issue where, like, well, if you're just a digital agency, you're useless, right? You're not different. And then we got into e-commerce, right? And so e-commerce is a little different, but then all of a sudden we're like, oh, there's maybe 1,000 viable good e-commerce agencies. And then you go into the platform and maybe there's 200 good Shopify agencies and there's maybe 100 good BigCommerce agencies. So what we started to do is we said, but what no one's really doing is they're looking at the whole digital customer experience and all the channels they could be on and architecting something for all of that, right? And that's what we've been doing. And we've been kind of like repositioning ourselves to be the digital agency for multi-channel, right? Because even D2C, the same thing is also happening with consumer, and they're realizing that just being a D2C site doesn't scale because you're going to end up having to spend too much money on Facebook ads. You need a store, you need wholesale. We're actually seeing a lot of our D2C customers go wholesale and go retail and doing B2B for that because it can't scale on D2C.
There are moments in time across the entire spectrum of e-commerce where the technology doesn't change the game so much as the adoption rate becomes affordable and it becomes more widespread, and then the technology and the strategy changes the game. Here's a key example. I like to call the e-commerce platform the mothership these days, right?
Yeah.
Because it used to be that your transaction was just that. It was a processing engine, linked to a catalog, linked to, a lot of SKUs with a lot of good data, out to order management, place the order. And that was the traditional role, both in B2B and B2C, of what an e-commerce platform does. Now, there are 14 different applications or services, and Isaiah, you can probably talk this better than I can, but there's 14 touch points that go into the e-commerce channel, that platform, that makes that the new hub for everything going on digitally with that new customer out there. The trick is, how do you marry what this new ecosystem of technology is with all those digital buyers out there coming in across those different channels, different ways? So
I'll tell you, it's actually, if I was starting from fresh, it's actually pretty easy. The problem is that these distributors and manufacturers are on, the 1997 version of Oracle JD Edwards.
Exactly.
They're on, if you gave me a clean slate and gave me a bunch of money, I could get you up and running on, a pretty scalable thing pretty quickly across, a large amount of channels, right? But what is not easy is you've got legacy tech and you've got legacy people. And I hate to, I'm trying to crap on these people, but you have, 100 years or 20 years, and even sometimes they're the tech people. We just, I just, I can't say too much, but I just know some tech people that they don't want to adapt because they don't know it. And they're just like, well, we only know how to do this one thing.
But the thing is, it's, as we all know, the whiteboard erases and then reinvents itself. So for instance, yes, I don't know, every single day we ask the folks that Paul and I talk with, what are your pain points? What's the op? What's holding you back? And it still comes down to the same three things, most of which is shooting yourself in the foot by doing it internally. Here's a case in point, and you just mentioned this, Isaiah, which is, you know, you're not going. You could spend a lot of money on, a nice platform, but what's the point if your legacy ERP system is a huge freaking mess,
Yep.
or you can't figure out, how to link. Uh, Here's the point: a transaction doesn't just stop when the order is placed. Here's your order. It's been received. It's being processed.
Yeah,
Out it goes.
it's not
This
enough.
goes all the way out to logistics land now. Supply chain disruption changed all that, right?
Yeah.
So now there's an ongoing role all the way back from the ERP to the platform out to that new logistics company out there who's outsourcing these days. How do you figure out where that plugs into serving the customer, so to speak? My point is, old methods of thinking about that aren't going to make it, and they are not. And so a lot of companies are struggling with the same internal issues, which is one, I can't get buy-in from these departments. Two, we've always kind of done it this way, so show me how I benefit by changing, kind of thing. So the more of that, the more of that, that's still kind of the top two issues. But you know what? It fixes itself. 2 years ago, you heard the same thing I did, which is, well, Salesforce buy-in, these guys are worried about losing their job and they're not going to embrace e-commerce and so on and so forth. I got so tired of hearing that. But you know what? Now, because of the great migration from 2 years ago, I'm hearing less and less about compensation for sales reps tied to the e-commerce stuff than I ever have before,
Me
because
too. Me too. Yeah.
they're making it a non-issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a non-issue now. I
I
agree.
think the
It's a
sales
change.
rep is becoming more of a non-issue. It's still an issue. Like I don't want to dismiss it
Well,
entirely.
I want you, yeah, but
Not
it's
entirely.
becoming less of an issue.
Yeah, the salesperson getting in the way of, oh, they're going to take my business because now, I'm not the order taker anymore. I think that's becoming less of an issue. But I do still think that there's a major issue with kind of like this collaboration between IT, sales, marketing. I mean, if they even have real
What
marketing. I mean, most
what
of
I,
the B2B companies don't even have real marketing, in my opinion. It's like,
yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head in a lot of things right in that last statement. I mean, what I would say though that's kind of interesting, and I've seen this more and more, is that, for example, a couple of my current clients, what I'll call it something different than what they're calling it so that they know I'm not, like dumping it all out there. But they do things that I'll say are like Innovation Tuesdays, right? Where they'll have meetings every week of the year now, where they're about what we're talking about, saying, okay, what did we miss the boat on? How do we fix this? How do we do X, Y, and Z? What tech is out there that we should be paying much closer attention to? And then really they follow through on that in the appropriate teams to kind of de-silo, to fix the old 1997 versions of X, Y, and Z, to address all of these things. And then they follow that, with something I think is also completely legit that a lot of our listeners also do, and they have their lunch and learns, right? So you're retraining your people weekly in a sort of voluntary, way where you have these, hour-long sessions that are just open, 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 and continuous, and say, look, here's stuff that you need to know about, I don't know, ChatGPT. I'll make it up for that, right? But things that you should know about, right, that
yeah,
may impact what you're up to in your job. And those two things together are really changing a lot of things in companies, right?
Yeah, I mean the thing, the old axiom, the queen and king are it. They're the king and the queen, the customer. So
Mhm.
I mean that's like basic business 101. But my point is, on the digital side, across all these channels, e-com and all this, it is it is buyer driven. I mean,
Mhm.
it's always been buyer driven, but now it's truly buyer driven because,
yeah,
the demographics of who the purchasing teams are, they're younger, they're more inclined for digital self-service. They want some high touch, human touch kind of thing. But the thing is, it's the buyers that know exactly what they want. And at the end of the day, what they want is real simple. Make it easy, help me do my job better so I can get home and have, uh, a life outside this procurement stuff, if you will. So that hasn't changed, but what has changed is the intensity by which buyers are dictating the terms of the landscape these days. And my point is, that's the op, and that's also, to Isaiah's point, the huge challenge. Quick little
Hmm.
true story.
Hmm.
I went out to a major manufacturing company, to kind of give a presentation and kind of a how's it going kind of talk a couple of months ago, right? And this is a $5 billion company, and it came from on high. Thou shalt do 48% of all sales digitally in 4 years, 3 years, I think it was. And we're talking billions of dollars that have to kind of transition from, you know,
Hmm.
from, from this, from the old way to the new way. Fine. So they kind of had me out to kind of do two things: talk about what the trends are, talk about, and kind of scare people, right? So
Sure.
they had their entire North American leadership team, the entire sales team there. And I brought along a couple of friends of mine from the industry that could talk like brass tacks, real how-to stuff and the nuts and bolts of e-commerce platforms and channel integration, all that kind of stuff. And they had been at this for 18 months, you know. And my point was, I was so shocked about how unready they were.
Hmm.
So we kind of gave this big presentation. They all listened politely, asked their questions, so on and so forth. But then in the afternoon, we kind of broke out in groups, right? Two of us went to kind of the sales guys. And this company was trying to figure out new verticals to kind of go after. And they had kind of a minor presence in it, but they had no clue as to how to go and get on the radar scope with the guys that mattered with a value prop that would kind of make them buy. And keep in mind, this is a multi-billion-dollar manufacturer, been around for 100 years, right?
Sure.
So I said, okay, well, can you disclose some numbers here? And they did. Like they're trying to sell into one big distribution company against their chief competitor who did about 21 million bucks a month, you
Wow.
know, and these guys were doing 55,000 bucks. So
They're
you see that the disconnect
like,
there.
yeah, that's 250 million that we can make right there, right?
So this whole afternoon is like, woe is me, woe is me, woe is me. What should I do here? What can I do? Blah, blah, blah. So, a couple of guys I brought with me kind of given, well, try this, try that, try this, try that. But then in the end, I said, well, just tell me this, right? What does that 55K tell you about what you're at now? I mean, what do your tea leaves read? Well, what do you mean? I said, well, for that 55K, at least what's your conversion rate, what's your ticket look
Yeah, what
like,
are they doing? What are they
what's your
doing?
AOV, I mean, all that. And they
Yeah.
said, well, we don't get that data.
Mm.
I said, what? I said, we don't get that data. I said, that's kind of basic econ 101 because that's at least a starting point into like some
Yeah.
look at what
Yeah.
this
Upsell,
customer thinks of you.
cross-sell. Yeah.
And they said, well, marketing has that. And they said, marketing doesn't give that to us. And I thought, this is March 2021, and here's a
Yeah.
company who's serious about having to get, half sales digital in 3 years or less, and that's their starting point. So I just I wasn't shocked by it. It just reinforced like how difficult, how challenging, how this stuff doesn't happen overnight, but it
Well,
does happen.
let me tell you a little bit about what I'm seeing, and I'm curious to hear. So, well, I'm seeing a lot of the same thing, which is finally, and I think Mark, we've been waiting 12 years for this, or for you 20 years, but for me 12 years for this to happen. I remember I got laughed out of a distributor in like 2012, and I was like, I think you guys can do $1 million on this site, and they're like, a million. They thought that was crazy in 2012, which obviously is not, like, that's not even a lot of money anymore in B2B commerce. But anyways, I think finally we're seeing the board members, the executives, especially the PE firms. In fact, I know a PE firm that just invests in B2B companies to digitize them and modernize them. At the top levels, more and more, not always, they're starting to say, look, we need to get competitive. We need to get digital sales to 30%, 50, in that case, whatever, 50%, something reasonable and higher, right? It's coming from the top level more and more. The problem is they don't have any of the people that can do it, and they don't hire the right agencies, and they don't hire the right vendors. And those go hand in hand. So there's two problems, right? The vendors are out here just trying to sell their point solution, right? They're trying to sell Commerce Tools, Magento, BigCommerce, whatever it is, or the procurement solutions or the ERP. But none of those solve the real problems because, as you know, to actually build this tech stack, it's probably at least 5, if not 10 to 20 pieces of software connected together, right? You have your ERP, you have your CRM, you have the ecom platform, you have, maybe PIM, email, SMS, like you add it all up, it's probably roughly 5 to 20 core pieces of software. So you need someone like me to come in and say, here's where you're at, here's what you need in terms of all that software, and here's how it's all going to work together, and here's the roadmap of like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and it's probably going to take you 3 to 5 years. Maybe phase 1 is 6 months to 12 months to get something live. Then we iterate, we get to 2, 3, 4. But none of that's happening, and they're bringing me in after they've already failed for 2 years.
And to kind of add on to that, one of the other big elephants in the room here, as I think you can attest to, Isaiah, is the fact that not only have you had to kind of figure out what these software components are, but it's got to fit a lot more channels these days because they come in, out, in, out, in, out, 100%. And identifying the customer touch points all the way back to how they mix and match and use the technology you need to offer.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thorn of the industry I see these days. Companies are wrestling with it. But one example here, we've got Envision B2B coming up. That's our B2B commerce show.
Tell us about that.
Well, the thing is, no, I'm not going to spend a lot about it because we're just, we're hardcore content people. And our mission is just to kind of make sure that people who come, take time away from their busy job, come to this show, they come away learning something because they are there to learn. So we pack this agenda with people that can teach people what they're doing, how they're doing it, what their misfires were, and where the op is. So for instance, one of our keynoters is Caterpillar. Caterpillar has this amazing success story of like what they're doing, but they've been doing dealer e-commerce for years and doing it just fine, right?
Yeah.
But their world is a good example of how they're trying to figure out the whole ecosystem, and frankly that goes all the way out to, those machines in the field or on the factory floor, all the way back into how parts are manufactured, sold, go through the dealer network, get replaced. And it's quite the fascinating story. But to them, their ecosystem is they look at all the Caterpillars out there in the world, all those pieces of equipment, connect those back to the mothership. That's the key to them.
Yep.
You collect the data, streamline it, then figure out the process for how to do that. And Caterpillar, of course, is this huge international company, this icon of American manufacturing. You know what? There are more companies like that beginning to figure it out, not just because they're big, have the budget for it. It's because what they did was kind of listen to their dealers and customers in ways I'd never really heard of before. So there are companies getting it right, and Caterpillar is one of them. So there's more of those.
I have some that are starting to get it, and they're building their own engineering teams, and they're actually building really good tech team. The ones that are getting it, I'm finding, they're building really good tech teams. Which is good and bad for us. It kind of replaces us. But what I'm doing is I'm saying, look, I'm not going to compete with your tech team. Let me help them. Let me make them better. And, you have access to all of the things that I can do. And we're just going to, whatever they can't do, whatever they need training on, we're going to help. I'm finding that I bet Caterpillar is a great tech team, right? Building this stuff, right? I assume,
One of the challenges, though, and I think you both touched on this, which is you can't take a new mindset to something as rapidly changing as e-commerce, because if you just do it the same old way, I see this time and time again, which is, I'll take this manufacturing example, right? The CEO said, thou shalt do. The board said, thou shalt do. Senior management, the guys with the money and who hire and fire people from way up high there, said, thou shalt do. Thou shalt be digital. Thou shalt have X number of dollars coming in digitally by this date and
Yeah.
time. Now, tell me what you need, worker bees to kind of get this done. So they know their customers want it. They know they got to do it. Well, they hire a hotshot. They hire somebody who knows e-commerce or digital marketing, all that left and right, knows all the tools of the trade, and a couple things happen. They often go in there and they're failing from day one because, yeah, the CEO wants it, but this guy's like the Maytag repairman. Remember that old commercial? The guy's lonely because
Yeah.
the rest of the organization does not want that.
No one's going to help
Don't
him.
see it.
No one's going to help him. And he can't,
Yeah.
IT doesn't help him. Sales doesn't help him.
So
And
the thing is, the cultures have to change, and the guys who are really going to do this well and live in this kind of brave new world where there's lots of money to be made doing e-commerce the right way, it's more internal than external, I
Well,
think.
I think it's, and you know what, I want to jump on a couple things you brought up here because I think we're all seeing different angles of the same story, right? I mean, so some of the client situations that I've been in recently, again, a multi-billion-dollar manufacturer that I've been working with, right? Multi-billion and over 100 years old, right? And they're trying to figure out what they've missed, right? Which pieces of the puzzle, and there's a lot of pieces that they miss. Let me just be very blunt about that, and they have a lot of catching up to do. What I found has been one of the most helpful things is doing lots of internal interviews, if you will, stakeholder type interviews, and lots of external interviews. And those external interviews are with, big customers. I said, give me your top, 10 customers, your top 25 customers. Who are they, right? Why are they your biggest customers? What does that mean? What do they do? Then all of a sudden, if you get these, reports and you bring these people in from meetings and they say, well, I'm driving 50 million to your company a year, and this is what I need, and this is what I don't have. And then it's repeated by the second customer who does 40 million, the third customer, all of these customers, it really just stacks everything in your favor. And then internal people all say, well, oh, yeah, they've told me this before from this angle. They've told me this before from this angle. And it basically creates this huge case, that you can't really deny any longer. And you're right, Isaiah, that a lot of the people, who are kind of on the board level or what have you, are now they're in the position asking for this. And the PE people are in the position saying, well, what is the right way to do this? Here's the model. Like, make sure we do this, to get things moving in the right direction. It's actually working so much better than it was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago.
Top down, but yeah, then it starts to break down. I see a lot in that as it funnels
in
down.
there are still issues. Yes, there's no question.
Well, I think frankly, just 2 or 3 years ago, we were all kind of hanging out at home because of COVID. Y'all heard this like headless stuff and headless commerce stuff and AI and deep data, and yeah, the big guys might do that because they're the big guys and that's what big guys do. But you know what? That is becoming this whole connected commerce, headless commerce is becoming the new enabler for how a lot of companies, if they can figure this out, that's how they make the quantum leap from old school to new op. And there's a lot being thrown at that. Everybody's trying to figure it out. I got to tell you, I was spending a lot of time, and so is Paul, with the e-commerce platform people, and they have their version of what they think connected commerce is. It's their version, but it's tied to like how their platform works in their
That's the
world.
problem, right? And that doesn't necessarily.
And the thing is, it's not really quite there yet. It's not really quite there yet, and it's not going to be. I had a vendor come the other day just to kind of kick the tires on. We're not quite sure what this is. Can you help us? So we had a nice chat, but the thing is, this is a leading e-commerce vendor out there in the industry. And well, you guys are the vendor and you haven't figured this out yet. Well, we're trying to. So that just tells you we're in kind of one of these situational technology shifts that eventually, when it becomes more mainstream, it becomes more cost effective. It
Yeah.
levels the playing field. But it's just like when SaaS hit the platform world on the retail side, you saw a lot of companies scale quickly because now they could use the same platform that the $1 million guys did, the $1 billion guys did, but
Yeah,
the
Shopify,
technolo's
right? I mean,
ubiquitous.
Shopify was a game changer for B2C,
Yeah.
right? And
So
so,
it's not the
yeah.
technology that's it's prohibitive. It's how you make use
Mhm.
of the technology to connect to the digital buyers who want things across multiple channels and how they want it based upon their complexity. So
We
that
are
is
getting
what,
headless commerce costs down. I will still say that headless commerce isn't quite there yet in terms of
no,
cost yet.
Nope.
We're working on it, and anyone that's telling you it's the same cost as just building a regular Shopify site or whatever is lying, I'd say. But the costs are coming down. Like I would say by in 3 years, we there's a good chance we can build a headless commerce site for the same or less cost as the traditional way of building.
yeah, and I think
Yeah.
I think my takeaway for that is, Isaiah, is exactly you're right, because the thing is that becomes next generation, more affordable, more advanced technology that gives you a lot more options to go across a lot more
Well,
channels that frankly is not there today.
well, what's
Mhm.
interesting about headless, and I know we're getting kind of like for
Sure.
people that don't know what headless is essentially decoupling your front end from your back end. And the actually interesting thing about headless commerce is most of these innovations have mainly helped B2C, right? And B2B is kind of lagged, and you start to get all the platforms that built their like B2B version kind of thing after the fact. Shopify just launched it. BigCommerce is a little ahead. Magenta's had it. Sales, but headless commerce, I would say, actually has more benefit for the average B2B company than the average B2C company.
Sure. Mhm.
Because B2B companies have all these channels, have all these back ends, have all this complexity, and now they can have this front end that can be whatever we want it to be, and we can roll up, anything they want in the back. We can roll up 10 back ends to the front end. And that's much more valuable for the average B2B company than it is for the average B2C company.
Yeah, so a couple of top line numbers. I mean, last year, just the B2B e-commerce sites and app stuff, just that channel, is just shy of 2 trillion now. 2 trillion. Yeah,
I love it.
I think
Just
it's
the sites, just to be
1.96.
clear, can we I just want people to really like they're going and logging in and buying directly on the B2B site.
Yeah, but I mean,
Yep.
keep in mind, if you combine all manufacturing distribution sales, which is about a third of the U.S. economy, that's 16 trillion right there. So it makes sense that 2 trillion is, I mean, 2 trillion is a big, huge number, but in context of the industry, it's still, more or less two-thirds, one-third. But that one-third is beginning to kind of take market share faster than any point in time that I've ever measured this stuff. And it's hard to, I mean, it really is hard to generalize across all the manufacturers and distribution companies out there. But the thing is, I try and tell people you need to at least understand what the macro drivers are, this 2 trillion number, what's driving the growth in that, if you want to kind of figure out way down the food chain what's happening in your part of the world. You know what I mean? So yes, they're very big numbers, but that growth rate is going to probably settle in for 18, 19% for 2023. And my takeaway there is this is a bit of an unusual year because of the interest rates, the economy, and when big tech bloodlets, it just kind of paralyzes even e-commerce a bit.
Mhm.
So I've seen a lot of paralysis out there where uh, they're not quite sure just what to do just yet because they had a bad quarter, or they see their customers getting gun shy, or they see a litany of reasons because they see Microsoft, Google, you know, cutting back, if you will. So there's a little bit of that more so now in the market that I've seen recently, but they'll get past all that. But
So
yeah,
let me ask
there's
you a
some,
real yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, go
So
ahead.
let me ask you, I think let's break because we talked about all this crazy, channel complexity. Let's talk through the channels a little bit. So you have 16 trillion. Where do you see that going? And like, so you'd say some is on the phone, right? It's well, is it the phone, or is it a direct key into the ERP, or how would you classify those kind of orders versus, the email versus the EDI and e-procurement and then e-commerce? And then some people still go to the store, right? Some of these guys have physical stores,
Oh, I
and it's a
know.
viable
Well,
channel,
the thing
right?
is, it's statistics and damn statistics, or variation of that phrase. I mean, uh, the big takeaway is 52-48. So basically 48% of every single business transaction out there is in some way, shape, or form electronic.
Sure.
Wow. So 48% of B2B is digital, game over. Why am I bothering with this stuff? Because my point is, a lot of that is, I mean, two-thirds of that 48% is EDI.
Mm-hmm.
So you take away that, but that's how companies still do business. I mean, to them, that is part of what they do, what
Let
they
me
call
ask you
electronic sale.
an important question to that. Do
Yeah.
you think they should be modernizing that and moving that to e-commerce?
When you talk to the EDI vendor guys, and they're the greatest thing since canned beer, because yeah. But the pure e-commerce part is now about 13% of manufacturing sales.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just 8 or 9%, not more than 2-3 years ago. So yeah, the market penetration of pure e-com and not just all this digital stuff is becoming. I mean, when you hit 13%, that is mainstream to me. And we'll see 1 in 4 transactions, I'll bet, inside 3-4 years. It's just bound to happen. So
Yeah.
that's just the way of the world, as it were. Marketplaces, though, are still the fastest growing thing I've ever seen in all the years of covering any kind of e-com. I have never
Yeah.
seen such
Yep.
wild
Amazon.
west,
Yeah.
see what it works,
Yeah.
interest. And I'm telling you, I'm hearing more and more and more success stories versus a flop when it comes to these marketplaces. And maybe you haven't heard it here first, but here's something I'm convinced of, which is I'm convinced that traditional distribution companies are either going to be put out of business or lose market share to these new vertical industry marketplaces that can do the same thing they do with a broader skill set and a broader tool set. And guess what? They bring the multitude of the buyers and sellers together. So there's a reason why Amazon Business accounts for 1 in 4 transactions across today's marketplace world, because that's where the volume is. So why would you? So my real point there is, as these vertical markets take hold, chemicals is a good example of that. You know, traditional traditional distribution companies that don't change and don't really go out there and try to figure out how their customers, what they really want, they will lose market share to marketplaces. I'm just
Do you think
convinced
they
of it.
should be, building their business model around becoming an ally to some of these marketplaces, selling on the marketplaces? I mean, obviously, I'm
They
sure you
have
know
to.
Brian
They
Beck.
have to.
You know Brian Beck, right? And that's
Yeah.
what he does, right? I mean, he's going
Sure.
and helping people get on Amazon, right? From a B2B
Well, the
perspective.
point is, I mean, it's not just the fastest growing sales channel. It's a sales channel that digital buyers just simply, they want it. You
Yeah.
know, they want the options to go out and source product. I mean, sourcing is still a problem, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Supply chain stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you listen to the public analyst companies like Granger and Global and MSC
Yep.
and Watsco, they're still talking about some lingering issues out there, so to speak. So their customers want to go where they can source product quickly, easily, efficiently, and increasingly they're going to marketplaces.
Well, I know MSC actually quite well. I worked with them on a project or
Yeah.
two in the past, MSC Industrial, and they're pretty remarkable. And if I remember this correctly, I mean their customers, right, would say things like, where are the QR codes on your parts? I want to scan things and do this. I want how do I reorder through a text? The customers were very, very forward thinking, and they're driving a lot of this. I mean, they're really just saying that. So you bring this stuff back to the home office and you say, my customers are saying this, and you got to figure out well, which of these in which order are we actually going to address now? Because it really is, if it's marketplaces, for example, that people want to be, then you got to be there. But also, if it's like, buying by text or reordering by text, then you got to do that too. I
We
mean,
know MSC, we know MSC pretty well too, and 62% of all sales through MSC are digital or electronic.
yep.
Now these guys define it across their internet connected vendor machines and EDI. So they kind of lump in the kitchen sink, but still, at the end of the day, you can call it an e-commerce transaction because that's what they call it. But what's interesting about MSC and what is a microcosm of what's more to come is how far e-commerce is now going into the actual, I call it the food chain. What I mean though is how far and how quickly e-commerce is advancing into the workplace. Case in point, MSC, they're metal products, right? They deal with, the tool and die masters. They came out with this product. It was basically a tool to kind of help tool and die makers machine parts better, faster, cheaper. And guess what? Ecom was a part of it.
Yep.
Not the big part of it, but ecom was a part of it. So yeah, all that CAD CAM, figure out precision measuring kind of stuff. My family had a manufacturing plant, so I know something of that world, but this tool was created for those MSC customers. And guess what? E-commerce became part of the journey. Or, if you talk to the engineering world, right? It used to be the engineers were like, doing what they do. And if they needed something, the support teams figured out the e-commerce channel as to do it. But you know what? If you go into a CAD CAM tool today, arguably the more advanced ones, e-com's part of it.
Yeah.
You need, some schematic deep inside some beast you're building here. Okay, product noted, we can build that for you, like an Xometry or something or a Proto Labs. We can build that for you. Just order it. So what amazes me is how far up and how deeply integrated ecom is now with what people do for a living. And you want future speak. Here's one that Joe Sigmund of Forrester pointed out to me a few years ago. I've yet to hear it, but it's going to happen, which is one of these days, those robots on the factory floor welding all those auto body parts together and all those things, they'll just, running low on oil or something for the robot, automatic reorder.
Yeah, they'll place the order.
Not even a human involved. Just robotics and do it because Now to me that's kind of like when I retire, anyways.
But that's
hopefully
really
not. Hopefully not. You'll be still here helping us make this channel better.
All I'm saying is that is you want an example of how e-commerce becomes even more touchless. I think it's fascinating. I've been trying to find somebody like high and low to invite me to the factory floor to kind of show me how this stuff works. And I haven't yet, but I think that's going to, if we're talking 2 or 3 years from now, I'm pretty sure we'll have written a bunch of stories about it. But for now, I'm convinced that's going to be one of the trends to keep an eye on, which is how does e-com become even more integrated on the factory floor
into the business itself?
Yeah. Well,
exactly.
Here's one of my minor predictions, and I'm sure that I'm not the first person to say this, but I keep thinking that all of the talk about AI and where it's going, part of it is going to be just having bots connected into the back end of all of these systems to say, for example, your robot example, on the factory floor, it's like, well, when oil hits whatever level, then the following begins, and the bot goes into its own processes and places that reorder, right? I mean, so I feel like a lot of these things, the tech is already there. We're talking about the idea layer, like exactly what could happen. And a few years from now, somebody just has to do it.
I think the interesting thing is, and I want to get back to the channels to like summarize all that, is that I think every channel will be massively disrupted or reliant on e-commerce, right? So let's, can we try and, okay, so you have phone, right? But even phone, it's like, I probably found you through the website or I looked at your website. Like, who's going to buy through the phone that's in 5 years that isn't going to look at the e-com site at all? I find that highly unlikely that you're going to place a phone order or an email order without ever looking at the e-com site, right? And so those channels, and then you have marketplaces, which is already e-commerce. You have e-commerce itself. You have, I mean, EDI is, I think, the interesting one where what if there becomes a more compelling use case to move EDI to e-commerce, then I mean that's going to accelerate this shift massively, you know.
The thing is though, I always like to kind of focus back on this, which is, way back towards my last couple of years ranking the online retailers on the B2C side, that was when it was post recession, 29, 2010 in through there, and that's when the retail chains, especially the apparel retailers, began falling like leaves left and right. They just couldn't make it anymore. And so that was truly the rise of, that's truly when you saw Amazon really become the Amazon. I mean, and they're always big and dominant. My point though is you can see the timeline back around that day where Amazon really became what it is today across everything it is today. You can see clear as day. Mm-hmm. You know what? When I would do our top 500 retailers, every year I came across maybe a fifth of my top 100 that in some way, shape, or form grew faster than Amazon did as a whole. Now, that's not exactly apples to oranges, because my takeaway then is the same for B2B as it is today, which is you'll do just fine, because go out there, figure out how to serve your customers in your niche, because nobody in your niche is going to know your product or your people or your customers better than you. So if you concentrate on that, figure out how you can do the best you can with what you can, you'll do just fine. It's when you don't have the wherewithal to say, well, I will dictate how my customer does business with me electronically, that's when you lose the game. But if you say, okay, I hear you say this customer, I'm going to give you as best I can, but in the meantime, I will serve you well on this current e-commerce site because I hear what you want. I will make improvements to customer service, or I will add the logistics transparency you want because you want that now. You do things like that. That's just like basic good customer service business sense. You'll do just fine,
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So you think some of this transition is just adding layers to the other channels? I guess to add to that, do you feel like, the e-commerce portal or platform, whatever you want to call it, could be the additional layer? So maybe they buy an EDI or through EDI, but they still log into the e-com site to see the tracking, or it's helping them with tracking, or it becomes this customer service portal, or it becomes a mothership. It's this mothership that you're talking about, maybe even.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we could define different technology terms here, Isaiah, but I think I am just so convinced, and I think there's others that would kind of back me up on this. Maybe not, but whatever. Which is the platform is the central piece of connective tissue for everything happening across the channel integration and across a technology ecosystem that is evolving. So it all comes down to what plugs into the platform and how the platform becomes the new procurement tool, the new finance tool, the new replenishment tool, the new supply chain planning tool, because that's what's happening. It's the central platform where everything else kind of plugs into it, and that's going to be the universe of where.
And do you see the traditional ERP as kind of more the behind the scenes? So now this mothership e-com platform is this new central hub, and the ERP is just really a tool in the background for specific purposes, among other tools that tie back into it.
Well, I'm very philosophical today, by the way. It's Friday, so I'm very philosophical. Here's the thing. Something has to heat the sun,
Yeah.
So I'm just back from SAP this week. They had Sapphire down in Orlando. So I ran around for the better part of 2 days talking to all those guys. And my point is, here's my analogy. Who produces the heat for the sun to kind of, heat our entire universe? It's the ERP stuff. It's the back end stuff. So my point is, the unsung hero, the unsung villain is if your back end systems are not capable of connecting to a better front end out to a more multi-channeled customer, if you will, who's doing a lot more digitally, then you're not even going to get to the race. Because if your back end and your data is not there, you've lost the space race because that's where it starts. My point is, you're not even off the launching pad. And then to your point earlier, Isaiah, which is there is still and always will be for the foreseeable future a lot of old legacy creaky systems that companies just simply will not replace because they don't want to, can't afford it, all the above. So the thing is, ERPs are expensive. Tech spending goes in cycles. Now it's kind of like back, be a little more cautious, we're finding, if you will. So, but the thing is, if you don't ever have your back end up to speed, you're never going to do all the futuristic stuff we're talking about. You're just not.
So that, but and I know we're kind of running out of time here a little bit, but don't you think that that's like the dilemma, right? So a lot of these companies, they have to decide like, oh, do I upgrade my back end first and put the ecom project on pause? And we're seeing some of that, right? And then it's like, but then they're just kind of like, it's like they're treading through mud, right? Like they're just really not getting anywhere because, the ecom project, the ERP drags out and they don't upgrade, or like, what should they be doing, right? Do you think they should just go all in and say, look, this is to stay in business, we have to upgrade this system. We have, like, I mean, I think that's one way to look at it, right?
It's an old friend of ours, Mike Powers, who's now the ecom guy out there at Alaska Rubber and Gas. I think they're called ARG now. But, one of the things they did, which I thought was really interesting, is out there in their world of, oil and gas fittings and pipings and stuff, if you will, they had the classic problem, cranky old ERP, and they were using kind of this niche semi e-commerce thing that their ERP vendor threw up because that was their version of e-commerce, right? Sorely lacking in that day and age. You know what that industry did? They're all kind of mid-market players. They all came together as kind of a cooperative, like a technology cooperative, so to speak, and they funded this model that, and AD did the same thing with Unilog for kind of that, the HVAC.
Yeah.
They came together as a co-op, developed they figured it out on a way they can all use the same technology to compete as they competed. But the thing is, they took the cost down because they shared the expertise to develop everything that was needed to have a decent platform.
Yep.
That's an example of, I think, ways that people are very innovative in trying to solve some problems here. So, for Alaska Rubber, ARG, putting in place a whole new ERP and front end on their own was a lot cheaper and a lot more effective when they got together with their fellows, went to their association, and developed a unique approach they could all use.
So you think these guys, they need to go out and stop, fighting against each other and not being scared to, share any data and say, look, like we're all on the same back end here, or what are we doing? Like how are we gonna compete and get off the launch pad and not lose. And not
three quick takeaway trends, to kind of show you where things are going. Look for B2B marketplaces to become more mainstream than ever before because the interest there is building. And you're just going to see a lot of movement to push that whole thing forward. Number two, the B2B buyer has always been in charge, but in this day and age, they are dictating what the sellers simply have to do because they're in a position to go to multiple sites, spend multiple times, figure out the channels they want to do business with online, and they know what they want. They know exactly what they want. And what they're going to do is they'll spend a great deal of time to go and find the sourcing and the products and the experience that they want.
Sure.
And the sellers that get that sooner as opposed to later, that's who's going to win the space race. Everybody else settle for the crumbs or out of business altogether. Simple as that.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, that was a great like summary to
it really was. I mean, I think our listeners have a lot to pick up on in this episode. We do want to circle back to one thing as we wrap this up. Envision. Tell our listeners when, where, and the details, just to make sure that they have
Well, first
that
off,
information.
thank you for the opportunity to kind of plug our show. I really appreciate that.
I
You know
really
what?
think you should.
I mean, what's my point? I think we're a little bit different as a company. Yeah, we make money off the show, and we got to stay in business too. But the thing is, we do it not just to be some, just some profit thing for the industry for us. We're trying to move the market along in ways that educate people on the importance,
Mm-hmm.
the drivers, and what e-commerce B2B means to them. So, Paul and I put together 62 speakers from big, small, otherwise. We have Grainger and MSC and Caterpillar and Minolta and all of that. We got the big guys coming, right?
Yep.
But the thing is, we have a lot of serious mid-size, small-size companies because everybody knows what they're doing for that part of things. So the point is, January, June 21st, June 22nd in Chicago at the Hilton, we're going to have the industry there, not to kind of talk about what is unrealistic, more importantly, kind of talk about come, learn, get some best practices, then go home and do it right. That's the whole point. So,
I do
yeah,
want to.
thanks for letting us kind of plug that way. I appreciate that.
That's fantastic. I think our listeners are going to be happy to hear about it. That's
I
great.
know we're running out of time, but I want to give some bright like vision for some of these smaller guys. So I think it could be very discouraging sometimes for the small mid-sized guys when they're like, I can't do what Caterpillar can do, right? Like it's just, but they have two advantages in my mind. Is one, they either already are sometimes more modern or they're already on NetSuite or something that's actually like pretty connective in the ERP side. Or if they're not, they're small, so actually migrating isn't as bad, right? So if you're small, migrating your ERP might be 100 grand, 200 grand, kind of, could be more, right? But it's not like you're going from, some $5 billion old SAP system trying to upgrade it. And it could be, and some of these guys can modernize fairly quickly, I think.
Well, just one of my final points here. When Caterpillar comes to talk keynote here in about a month or so in Chicago, and they're right here with me was they're not going to like just spend 25 minutes in a fireside saying how big we are, how great we are, here's how we got there, worship us. Not the point. They're going to tell part of their story, like what they did as best practices to listen to their customers and dealers to deliver what became their ongoing e-commerce strategy. So they're going to talk takeaways about we did this as a best practice, and it doesn't matter how big you are, you can do the same thing. So they'll talk about what they did with their user groups or what they did with their customers, so to speak. So that is a best practice that a forward-thinking company, regardless of size, is going to talk about to the folks coming. You can do this too. Here's how. So
it's always a treat to have you, Mark. Our listeners are just love you and
ain't
they're
this stuff fun? Ain't this stuff fun?
We're writing an article, right? It's better than
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. This is great. This is so great.
Well,
episode 95. What do you think?
Hang with you guys beats working for a living. I'll say that. So
exactly.
I just need to figure out how to monetize this better so I can.
We're gonna do it.
Do this all
we
day.
need more sponsors. Come on, sponsors. All right. Well, cool.
Yeah.
Well, violence and sex always sells. So I'll leave that with you.
We'll pick up on that in episode 97.
That's the biggest problem on the B2B e-commerce podcast. We get some really cool listeners, important people, but it's not the Joe Rogan podcast, not yet.
Just quickly, back in the day when we were kind of out there, like really kind of like getting a lot of play across verticals, ranking the online retailers. All the porn guys kept knocking.
Yep.
Come rate us. We'll give you free samples, and we'll we're a family company here, you know. So
I remember those stories. Yeah.
like clockwork, it's like clockwork. I'd get, you know, emails, calls, or both, like, you know, from the porn guys saying, "Hey, you know, we invented which they did, by the way. They invented
Yeah.
e-commerce."
Yeah.
Know?
Oh yeah.
So,
like
exactly.
gated content or paid content? Is that how you
I
would
said, "Sorry, can't help you on that one. We're just not that way." But, you know, they kept trying to their thing. So it shows you where ecom
Well,
went.
that
You know?
did you watch I think it's the Hulu movie on the tape, the sex tape, and how they monetize it on the internet. It was before the internet.
Yep.
No one knew how it worked, and that's how they made money on it, because it was like 1996. And
Oh, I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. So I don't know. Not our cup of tea, so we never did, and we never will. You know, it always made kind of interesting over coffee, and all of a sudden this pops into your email. Just
Well,
one quick war story. Sorry, one quick war story. I was like, I was in my office one day, and it was the height of the Topic Hunter research season, and I'm getting like emails left and right back in the email days about, you know, who's doing what, and I got pinged by one of the porn guys, right? So I opened the email, and it was a pretty graphic, and our CEO walks in.
of course, of
Mark,
course,
what are you doing when I'm paying you for this?
of course.
He understood. He knew that these guys just kind of knocking on the door trying to get in. It's, you know,
Very funny.
You might have to have a
Could've gone the wrong
separate
way.
show just for them, like a separate
It could have gone the wrong. It could have
you
gone the
know,
wrong way.
version.
You know, it's just, so anyway.
Well,
off we
with
go.
that, I think we'll close episode 9.
Thank you, Mark. We'll have to have you back. You know, hopefully with less time frame in between. So
Yeah, well, thanks, guys. It's always a pleasure talking to you because it's fun just, you know, kind of seeing what's what. But yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you here. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.
thanks, Mark.
See ya. Bye.